My name is Claire Merritt. I'm 29 years old, and until 6 weeks ago, I genuinely believed that being the dependable one in my family was something to be proud of. I'm the oldest of three. The one who moved to Charlotte, built a career, and answered every phone call that started with, "We need a little help right now." When my younger sister got engaged last spring, I did what I always do. I stepped up before anyone even asked. I transferred $52,000 into my parents' joint account and told them, "Make it beautiful. Whatever she wants." I thought I was giving my sister the wedding she'd dreamed about since we were kids, sharing a bedroom in rural Tennessee. I didn't know I was funding an event I wasn't invited to attend. The call that changed everything came on a Tuesday afternoon. I was in the middle of a staffing review at my desk, coffee going cold beside me, when my phone rang. I recognized the name immediately. Donna. She's one of my senior event coordinators, and she never calls me during business hours unless something is wrong. I picked up expecting a scheduling conflict or a vendor cancellation. "Hey Donna, what's going on?" She hesitated, which is not something Donna does. "She's the most efficient person I've ever hired." "Claire," she said carefully, "I'm looking at the final staffing sheet for the Merritt Caldwell wedding on the 14th. Can you tell me why your name isn't on the VIP guest list?" I actually pulled the phone away from my ear and stared at it for a second. "I'm sorry, what?" "Your sister's wedding. The event is flagged under our premium family discount package, which means it routes through my desk for final approval." I'm looking at the seating chart, the guest database, the ceremony layout, everything. "You're not anywhere on this document, Claire. Not in the family section, not in the general guest list." I checked twice because I thought it was a clerical error. There was a long pause on my end while I processed what she'd just said. "Who submitted the final documents?" I asked. "Your mother," Donna said quietly. "She's been the point of contact since the beginning. I just assumed you knew everything, since it's your family and your discount code. But when I saw your name missing, I thought something felt off." I thanked Donna, told her I'd get back to her, and sat completely still for about 90 seconds. Then I opened the shared folder I'd set up when this whole thing started. Back in January, when my sister and her fiancé got engaged, I'd created a master planning document and shared it with my mother. I'd labeled every vendor, every service, every line item. I'd approved staffing budgets, menu selections, floral packages. Our company handles large-scale event staffing and hospitality operations across the Carolinas. When my sister needed a wedding, I quietly made sure she had access to the best of what we do, at a fraction of what it would cost any outside client. I scrolled through the folder and found something I hadn't noticed before. A subfolder I hadn't created, titled Day of Logistics, that my mother had added 3 weeks ago. I clicked in. There were documents I'd never seen. A revised seating chart, a ceremony program, a vendor communication log. I wasn't in any of them. Not as a bridesmaid, which I had always assumed I would be. Not as a guest of honor. Not as a guest at all. I kept scrolling and found an email thread that had been accidentally saved to the shared folder, probably because my mother doesn't fully understand how cloud sharing works. The subject line was Claire's involvement going forward. My mother had written to my future brother-in-law's mother 6 days earlier. "I think it's best we keep Claire in a supporting role behind the scenes. She has a tendency to take up a lot of space in social situations. This is Amber's day, not a showcase for Claire's business connections. We've already benefited from her generosity, and she understands that her contribution is a gift. She won't expect acknowledgement." I read that paragraph 4 times. Then I found the reply from his mother. "I completely agree. Is she even planning to attend? I assumed she'd be too busy with work to really participate." And my mother's response, 3 words that I still think about when I'm trying to fall asleep. "Probably for the best." Now I want to ask you something directly, because I need you to weigh in before I tell you what I did next. If you opened a shared folder and found an email where your own mother told a near stranger that your absence from your sister's wedding was probably for the best, what would you do? Would you call and confront her immediately? Or would you sit with it first and think before you moved? Tell me in the comments, because the answer matters more than you might think. I didn't call anyone that night. I went home, changed out of my work clothes, and sat on my kitchen floor eating leftover pasta while I thought through every angle of what I'd just seen. I'm not someone who reacts emotionally in the moment. It's genuinely a professional liability in my line of work. When a venue floods 3 hours before a gala or a keynote speaker cancels at midnight, the person who panics is the person who makes it worse. So I sat on my floor and I thought, here's what I knew. I had contributed $52,000 that was now referred to as a gift that required no acknowledgement. My company's staffing department, which answers to me, was fully contracted to provide servers, catering support, setup crew, a day of coordinator, and a transportation liaison for the event. My senior coordinator, Donna, who also answers to me, had flagged an irregularity that my own family hadn't bothered to mention. And my mother had decided, without telling me, that my presence at my sister's wedding would take up too much space. Here's what else I knew. Every single person scheduled to work that wedding was on my payroll. I called Donna back at 7 in the morning. She answered before the second ring. I thought I'd be hearing from you, she said. I need you to pull the staffing assignments for the 14th, I told her. All of them. Claire, she said slowly, that's 22 people. Servers, setup, catering coordination, transport. If I pull them with less than 4 weeks out, the event is going to have a very serious problem. I know, I said. Reassign them. We have the Hartley corporate retreat that weekend. They need more ground staff anyway. Consider it done. Donna was quiet for a moment. Are you sure? I pressed my back against the kitchen counter and looked out the window at the early Charlotte skyline. I was completely sure. What they had done wasn't carelessness. It wasn't an oversight. They had made a deliberate decision, documented it in writing, and told each other that my absence was not only acceptable but preferable. The money was fine. The company discount was fine. The 22 people on my staff showing up to make the day run beautifully? Also fine. Me, sitting in a chair and watching my sister get married? Not fine. Too much space. Not the right vibe. If that's how they wanted to define my value, then I was going to let them experience what my value actually looked like when it walked out the door. Reassign everyone, I said to Donna, and send me the confirmation when it's done. 3 days later, I drove 4 hours to my parents' house in Tennessee. I hadn't told anyone I was coming. I pulled into the driveway at 2 in the afternoon on a Saturday and sat in my car for a few minutes before going inside. The front yard looked exactly like it always had. My mother's flower beds along the porch, my dad's truck parked slightly crooked in the same spot it had been in for 20 years. Normal, quiet, like nothing had happened at all. I walked in through the unlocked front door. My parents were in the kitchen. My mother looked up from the counter where she was going through a stack of RSVP envelopes, and her face did something complicated that she quickly rearranged into a smile. Claire, sweetheart, we weren't expecting you. I know, I said. That's why I didn't call. My father stood up from the table and moved toward the coffee pot in the way he does when he wants to seem busy. Your mother's in the middle of wedding stuff, he said. Maybe not the best weekend to drop by. I pulled out a chair and sat down at the kitchen table without being invited. I think it might actually be the perfect weekend, I said. I'd like to talk about the wedding. My mother set down the envelope in her hand. What about it? I'd like to talk about why I'm not on the guest list. The silence that followed was the kind that tells you everything. Not surprised silence. Not confused silence. The kind where two people are quickly deciding how to reframe something they already know is indefensible. My mother spoke first. Where did you hear that? She asked. I looked at her steadily. One of my employees called me because my name wasn't in the guest database, and she thought there had been an error. My mother's expression shifted just slightly. She set her shoulders back, which is something she does when she's decided to commit to a position. Claire, we just thought it might be less complicated if you weren't in the formal guest setup. You know how you are at these things. You end up managing everything. You can't help it. People end up talking to you about work, and the whole focus shifts. So your solution was to not invite me. I said. We didn't not invite you, my father said, turning around from the coffee pot. We just didn't list you formally. You're family. You'd obviously be there. With no seat assignment, I said. No acknowledgement on the program. No role. Just standing somewhere in the back of a wedding I paid for. My mother's chin lifted slightly. You offered that money freely, Claire. You said it was a gift, We took you at your word. I looked at her for a long moment. I found the email, I said. The one where you told Diane Caldwell it was probably for the best if I didn't participate. The color left my mother's face. You weren't supposed to see that, she said, and then seemed to realize immediately that this was the exact wrong thing to say. I know, I replied. I'm getting the impression there were a lot of things I wasn't supposed to see. The revised seating chart, the ceremony program, the communication log where every vendor interaction was routed through you with specific instructions not to copy me on anything. My father sat back down at the table. He looked tired. Lauren, this is getting out of hand. My name is Claire, I said quietly. He blinked. I know that. Then say it, I said. There was another silence. Then my mother sighed the way she always sighs when she's decided she's the real victim of a conversation. We just wanted the day to belong to Amber, she said. You're so successful, Claire. You have your business and your employees and your whole life up in Charlotte. Amber doesn't have any of that. She's always felt a little in your shadow. We wanted her to feel like the most impressive person in the room for one single day. I let that sit for a moment before I responded, and the way to do that was to take my money, use my company's services, and pretend I didn't exist? We weren't pretending anything. We just thought, you told someone it was probably for the best, I said. Those were your exact words. Not we'll figure out a role for Claire. Not we want Amber to feel special. Probably for the best. Like my being at my own sister's wedding was a problem to be quietly solved. My mother's eyes filled with a particular kind of tears that are more about being caught than being sorry, and I recognized them because I had seen them my entire life. Whenever I raised something uncomfortable, the tears arrived before the accountability did. That's when my sister walked in through the back door. Amber is 25. She's sweet in the way that people are sweet when they've never had to fight for anything, because someone else was always fighting on their behalf. She looked at the three of us, read the room immediately, and said, "What's going on? Why don't you tell her?" I said to my mother. My mother stood up from the table and said something under her breath about getting water, which was the exit she always took when she didn't want to finish a conversation she'd started. So I told Amber myself. I told her about Donna's call, about the email, about the guest list. I kept my voice level because I genuinely was not angry at my sister, the way I was angry at my parents. She hadn't written the email. She hadn't made the decision. But I also wanted her to know what had happened, because she deserved to know what was being done in her name. Amber went very still while I talked. When I finished, she said, "I didn't know about the email. I knew Mom wanted to keep the planning between us, but I didn't know you weren't on the list. Did you ask?" I said gently. She looked down at the table. "Mom said you were really slammed at work and probably wouldn't want to be involved in the details." "There's a difference between not being involved in the details and not being on the guest list," I said. Amber was quiet for a moment. "I'm sorry," she said. "I should have checked. I want to stop here and ask you something. When you're the reliable one in your family, the one who has it together, the one people call when they need something, does anyone ever stop to ask what you need? Or is it just assumed that because you're capable, you're also fine?" Because that's the question I'd been living inside of for years, without ever putting words to it. Tell me in the comments if you've felt that, because I think more people have than let on. My parents and I did not have the clean reckoning that afternoon that I had been hoping for. My father retreated into vague statements about good intentions. My mother kept circling back to the idea that she had been trying to protect Amber's confidence, as if the only way to give one daughter something was to subtract it from the other. They were not malicious people. They were people who had made selfish choices so consistently that those choices had started to feel like love. I drove back to Charlotte that night without resolving anything, which is not something I'm proud of. I called my best friend Risa from the road and talked the whole way home. "You have more power here than you're acting like you have," Risa said when I'd finished. "What do you mean?" She made a sound that was halfway between a laugh and a sigh. "Claire, 22 of your employees are scheduled to work that wedding. You haven't pulled them yet, have you?" I told her I had already made the call to Donna. Silence. Then, "Okay then. You know what's going to happen." "I know," I said. "Are you ready for it?" I stared at the highway in front of me and thought about my mother's voice, saying probably for the best to a woman she'd met 3 times. I thought about the email chain, the revised seating chart, The $52,000 sitting in my parents' account, now framed as a gift they didn't need to acknowledge. Yeah, I said. I am. Here's what happened in the 2 weeks before the wedding. The catering team director reached out to my mother to confirm the revised staffing numbers and mentioned, gently, that there had been an internal reallocation. My mother called me immediately. Her voice had the particular pitch it gets when she realizes something is outside her control. Claire, what did you do? I let the staffing team know I needed them elsewhere that weekend, I said. You can't do that. We have a contract. The contract is with my company, I said. I am my company. Check the signatory line. There was a long pause. This is because of what happened, isn't it? You're punishing your sister. I'm not punishing anyone, I said. I'm making a business decision. If your family would like to contract a full event staffing team externally, with 4 weeks' notice, on a Saturday in May, you're welcome to try. She called back 4 hours later. The external quotes she'd received started at $18,000 and went up from there, and that was without the specialized coordination Donna's team provided. The bartenders, the setup crew, the transportation liaison, and the day of manager who knew the venue layout because we had worked it a dozen times before. None of that was replaceable in 4 weeks at a price my parents could absorb. What do you want? My mother asked. Her voice was very quiet. I want to be at my sister's wedding, I said. Not because I need the seat, but because I am part of this family, and acting like I'm not, after everything, is not something I'm willing to accept. There was a long pause. And if we agree to that, then I reinstate the staffing team, I said. And we have an honest conversation about the email and the guest list and the pattern that led to all of this. Not to punish anyone, because if we don't name it, it will just happen again in a different form. My mother said she would talk to my father. She called back the next morning. He hadn't slept well. He wants to know, she said slowly, why you didn't just say something instead of going this far. I laughed. Not unkindly, because every time I say something, I get told I'm taking up too much space, I said. At some point, I decided to actually see what that space was worth. I want to ask you something, and I want you to be honest with me in the comments. If someone in your family found out you'd been quietly pushed out of an event you funded, and they said, why didn't you just talk to us instead of making it a whole thing, would you be able to stay calm? Because I'll tell you, that question took everything I had. The family meeting happened 9 days before the wedding. Not at my parents' house this time. We met at a restaurant halfway between Charlotte and their town, neutral ground, a Sunday morning when the place was mostly empty. My parents, my sister, her fiancé, and me. My father started the way he always starts, when he's prepared to be accountable, which is by first explaining why the situation was complicated. There were good intentions, he said. They had wanted to protect Amber from feeling overshadowed. They hadn't meant to erase me, only to manage the optics of the day. Manage the optics, I repeated. He rubbed the back of his neck. You know what I mean. I do know what you mean, I said. You were embarrassed that Amber's wedding needed to be funded by her older sister, so you decided the cleanest solution was to pretend that sister wasn't there. The money could stay. The reminder of where it came from had to go. My brother-in-law-to-be, Marcus, had been quiet through all of this. He was quiet now, too, but he was watching my father with an expression I hadn't seen before, something that looked like it was reconsidering. My sister spoke up. She said, I should have pushed back when Mom said to keep you out of the planning. I knew something felt wrong, and I let it go because it was easier. That's on me. That was the first genuinely honest thing anyone had said since I'd walked into my parents' kitchen 2 weeks before. I looked at my sister and felt something in my chest unclench slightly. I don't want an apology that just covers this one incident, I said, looking at all of them. I want to talk about the fact that this has been the pattern for a long time. I've been the one who solved things, the one who covered gaps quietly so nobody had to feel embarrassed, the one whose success was fine to benefit from, as long as it stayed invisible. At some point, I started letting that happen because I thought that was what being a good sister looked like. It's not. It just taught everyone that my feelings were optional. Marcus cleared his throat. He said, For what it's worth, Amber told me about everything that happened. And I want you to know that I didn't know about the guest list situation until 2 days ago. I also want you to know that if Amber and I had been told the full picture from the beginning, we would have pushed back ourselves. We're not interested in starting our marriage with that kind of thing underneath it. I looked at him for a moment, then nodded. I appreciated that more than I could have told him in that setting. My mother started to cry. Real tears this time, not the reflexive kind. She said, I have spent so many years trying to make sure your sister didn't feel less than. I didn't realize I was doing it by making you feel like a resource, instead of a person. That sentence stayed with me. Saying it out loud didn't undo anything. It didn't return the weeks of sting or refund the energy I'd spent sitting on my kitchen floor, running calculations about my own family. But it was true, and she said it, and sometimes that matters even when it doesn't fix everything. Tell me honestly, if someone who hurt you finally said exactly the right thing, would it be enough? Or would part of you still be standing slightly to the side of the whole thing, watching to see if the behavior actually changes? Because that's exactly where I was sitting in that restaurant booth. Hopeful and guarded at the same time. I reinstated the staffing team. I confirmed my seat at the ceremony. My name went back on the guest list, in the family section this time, with a note from my sister that said MOH stand-in because she had always actually wanted me involved in the wedding party and had been told I was too busy to commit. The wedding happened on a Saturday in May. It was a beautiful day, the annoying kind of beautiful where the light does that thing in late afternoon where it makes everything look like a film still. My sister walked down the aisle, in a dress she'd been describing since we were teenagers. Marcus cried before she even made it to him. My parents sat in the front row, and my mother reached over at some point and squeezed my hand, and I let her, because I am a person who still has room for things to be better, even when they have also been hard. I did not pay for the event. That part I held firm on. We used my company's team, contracted at the standard rate, invoiced properly, paid on time. My sister and Marcus covered the costs themselves, with a modest contribution from both sets of parents. It was a smaller wedding than originally planned. No specialty linens, no 12-piece band, no weekend-long venue rental. But it was honest, and nobody spent the reception pretending that the person who made it possible wasn't in the room. I'd like to tell you that everything resolved cleanly after that, but real life doesn't do that. My mother and I are still figuring out how to talk to each other differently. There are moments when she starts to slip back into old language, where she frames my choices as things I'm lucky to have rather than things I worked for, and I stop her now, gently but clearly. I've noticed that she actually responds to it. She doesn't love being corrected, but she loves me, and she's starting to understand that those two things can coexist. My father told his brother at the rehearsal dinner that his daughter runs a staffing and hospitality company across the Carolinas. Not his successful daughter, not his daughter, the businesswoman said, with the particular inflection that means, and isn't that a lot? Just runs a company, matter of fact. Like it was simply the true thing, which it was. It was the first time in my adult life I'd heard him describe me without an asterisk. My sister and I talk more now than we have in years. She called me last month to ask my opinion on something completely unrelated to money or family logistics, just because she wanted to know what I thought. I stayed on the phone with her for an hour. It felt like something being rebuilt rather than something being fixed, which I think is the more accurate word for what recovery actually looks like. Here's the thing I keep coming back to, the thing I want to leave you with. I spent years believing that being reliable was the same as being valued, that covering the gap quietly was the same as being appreciated, that as long as I never asked for anything, everyone around me would somehow understand what I needed without my saying it. None of that was true. Being reliable without boundaries doesn't build love. It builds expectation. And expectation, when it's never examined, eventually becomes entitlement. If you're the strong one in your family right now, the one who shows up, the one who figures it out, the one people call when the situation requires someone who won't fall apart, I want you to stop and ask yourself one question. When was the last time someone in your family treated your presence as the gift, not just your capability? Because your capability is not the most valuable thing you offer. You are. And the moment you start treating those two things as the same, the people around you will start to as well. I reinstated the staffing team because I chose to. Not because my family deserved the grace, but because I decided I wanted a sister more than I wanted to win. That was my choice to make, and I made it with clear eyes. But I want you to understand that the reinstatement came with conditions. Not punishments, not ultimatums, conditions. I will show up. I will contribute, when I choose to, with full credit and full consent. I will be in the room, and I will not make myself invisible to make someone else more comfortable ever again. The Bank of Claire is still open, but the terms have changed, and they're not negotiable. So I'll end with this, because I genuinely want to hear from you. If you had been in my position, if you discovered your family removed you from an event you funded, would you have pulled the staffing team and forced the confrontation? Or would you have walked away, taken the loss, and preserved the peace? And more than that, is there somewhere in your own life right now where you've been treating your presence as less important than your output? Because I think for a lot of us, the real revenge story isn't about the vendors or the money or the dramatic phone calls. It's about the moment we finally decide that we are not optional. That's the moment everything actually changes. Leave me a comment. I want to know where you're watching from, and I want to know what you think. You already know what I did. Now tell me what you would have done.